using white bond poly for a number of years. If I'm going to turn in a dust collector, I mean a vase or something that's going to sit on the shelf and collect dust, typically I'll put an oil finish on it, let it set 4 or 5 days, and then I'll spray it in lacquer. If I think it's going to be functional, typically I'll use a white bond poly. I've never used the gloss, I've always used the satin. And the thing that I have not done yet, but I will after this session, if I were going to be here, is I'm getting into the buffing part to see what that does to a satin finish as far as cleaning up. I did it on one piece, and I liked it. What I did not like about it when I was buffing that is the white bond poly does not fill the pores, and so when you start buffing, you've got to worry about getting either the buffing compound or the wax that's filling the pores up. But it does give a good finish.
What kind of white bond poly are you using?
The only kind that I have used is General Finishes Satin Poly, or Armor Seal is what it's called. Most of the stuff I don't like a real high shine on, and that's why I do it. But sometimes I do, and so rather than buy another kind, I'll just try the buffing way to approach to it. Did you see anything?
Yeah, backwards. Is it upside down there? Pull that one up there and see what that looks like.
That one?
Yeah, that one.
Okay. I'll pass this around. I would like it back eventually, but I'll probably be gone before it gets to the group. But what I did is I kind of made my own batch of wiping poly. I mixed, can you see anything on that or no?
Better on the TV screen.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, done.
I mixed 1 part polyurethane, 1 part oil linseed oil, and 1 part turpentine. And that I used on one side, and you'll see it's labeled on the edge. And I put a total of 12 coats on. I got to, I think, 5 coats, and then I sanded with 400, and then I did that with both finishes. And then I put another, I don't know, I can't count slash marks, 8 or 10 coats on. I've got a total of 12. What I didn't like about my brew, I called it John's brew, is that the more coats I put on, it did not seem to dry as fast, and it didn't give quite the sheen that I thought it would. But that was kind of gave me a reference point on the other. Same coats on the other. I got 1 coat in one panel, 5 coats, and then I've got 12 coats on the other one. So if you want to, I don't know how long, if I got wires on me or what, you can kind of see what it does. On this pen, pardon?
What was the mix?
John's brew. Okay, polyurethane, boiled linseed oil, and turpentine, equal parts. I have tried it at one point with shellac in there, but I think I had the wrong solvent in it and it separated. But I worked with a guy that worked in a furniture store, and they made something like that, and that's what got me to experimenting initially to see if I could come up with my own brew. The thing I don't like about it is once you get down about this far in the can, unless you use it every day, it seems like you get a skim coat on the top and then it gets so thick you can't use it. So what this one I don't want to pass around because I need to leave right away, but this was, it's a maple burl, and I polished it, very high finish on it, and I've only got 3 coats on this, and it's almost as shiny as that is.
Same brew?
Pardon?
Different?
This with Armor Seal. This is with the Armor Seal. Yeah. What I've just started to do is I got these little bottles, and hopefully won't be as much air in it. Or the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mount it like this, and so if I get a skin coat on top, it'll be on top, not on the bottom, and just see how that works. If you're using it every day, it's probably a non-issue, but if you do it periodically, like I end up doing, you end up throwing half the can away. I've tried putting marbles in the bottom of the can and chunks of steel in the bottom of the can, but it just doesn't happen. So to put it on is super simple. You gotta watch close, because it's gonna go fast. Are you seeing me?
Can we get to that camera? Here it comes.
We're on?
Here we go. There you go. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Don't want you to miss it now.
Going dry. It's drying.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. If you put too much on, just don't do it. You can build it up a little bit faster, and early on I may do that, but you gotta sand it down. Okay, I'm done. The nice thing about it, I can go downstairs, line up 10 projects, wipe a real thin coat on, and then we're out of there.
What, you got a rag there, or what are you wiping it on with?
This is a very special sweatshirt that I cut up into pieces. Where did my little...
It's right under the lathe.
Okay.
You ever put it on with the lathe spinning or not?
I can't say I have. And the one thing you do kind of have to watch out for is that you don't wipe it too dry, or try wiping it while it's trying to dry. You've got to keep, like this pin the other night, I thought I was done. I took the rag and there was still enough on it to wipe it on, and I was good.
1 part polyurethane
1 part boiled linseed oil.
and 1 part boiled linseed oil.
Yeah,
Boiled linseed oil and polyurethane.
yes.
And polyurethane type is Armor Seal?
No, the polyurethane that I used, I think, was Varathane. Varathane. I don't think that's as big a factor what polyurethane you use. It's just going to help it dry.
Which gloss? Which gloss?
What gloss?
Pardon?
What gloss? Satin?
Satin is what I've used.
What about using regular polyurethane as a wipe on?
You can try it. I think it will not penetrate as much, and I think the oil helps the penetration part of it. You can experiment. Another thing that I've just this week thought about trying was shellac, alcohol, and boiled linseed oil to see what happens, because what I had tried, the solvent wasn't compatible with the other things. So alcohol and shellac would be what it's going to do with boiled linseed oil, I don't know.
That's called French shine, those 3 parts. That's what I use.
French shine?
French
Okay.
shine or
Friction polish.
Yeah.
friction polish, or Captain Eddie's shine juice. There's
Okay.
equal parts DNA, BLO, and shellac.
Okay. And I had not used the right something or other, and it didn't work, so.
Yeah, you put lacquer thinner in it.
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't do that. I put regular thinner in it, yeah. Any other quick questions?
I mean, I use just straight wipe on poly, and that seems to leave a pretty nice finish.
Well, and that's basically what the Armor Seal is a wipe on poly. And I think Minwax makes one too, but I have not experimented with that.
You
So,
like the wipe on poly better because of your blend?
better than what?
The blend you made. The John.
Yes, and you'll see on that board when it gets to you, it's got a higher finish. And it's set up overnight. My brew, I had to go almost 2 nights before I could put another coat on or sand it. And I typically sand, the first time I sanded with 400, and then the second time I did it with 600. You could probably do a Scotch pad or anything. I've had runs or something like that, then I'll use 400 and sand the runs out if I have to. So it's easy to repair if you screw up, but it's easier than having to clean your brush out every time. But yeah, it is going to take more coats.
That shine juice, if you use it and you let it sit for a long time, you're going to lose volume. With the alcohol evaporating, you can add alcohol to it and refresh it and be ready to go again. So you don't have to throw it away.
Good.
Just mark your,
So you know where you're at. Good, makes sense. Thank you, I learned something every day. Okay, I hate to run,
Yeah, you need to go.
but a good friend died and I want to be there.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, I've been asked to do a friction polish, or not friction polish, a CA finish. I use it mostly on small pieces, a lot of pens. I've done some stoppers. It works really well if whatever you're doing has potential of being dipped in water. It's not going to be a finish that is waterproof, but it will be a lot more resistant than your friction polishes or anything like that. To get going here, I got one piece here. It's just a pen. I want you to take a look at, I'm going to pass it around, take a look at the finish on the wood, but also the finish on the metal. That thing has been kicking around for about 4 years. I work at Steelcase. It's in and out of toolboxes. It gets knocked around on the floor. Just a lot of things happen to it. The finish itself is holding up very well on the wood, not so much on the metal. So whatever we did there does seem to work. All right, as far as glues, different types of product that's out there, I find a big difference in different brands, not so much in how the glue works, but the consistency of it. And I think whenever you get going, you're going to want to find the consistency of CA that you like to flow. It's a really pretty quick process until it comes time to finish it out. All right, I got a couple different types of wood chucked up here. They're just simple pen blanks. And one thing I do want to say is that I have found that not all woods will take a CA finish. I will have some stuff, and if it's even the same piece of wood, different parts of it, I think it has a lot to do with the consistency of the piece itself. If there's porous parts in it, the finish is going to absorb into it and not build up enough to actually be able to buff it back out. I have more problems with things that have high oil content, teak, cocobolo, burls. That's a consistency thing. A couple things I've done, not 100% to get around it, is generally when I started, I really like the glue that we're selling here. It just seems to be a little bit, I use the medium most. I think it is a little bit thinner than some of the other stuff that's out there. Again, it goes back to the, I think, the velocity of the glue itself. It works well for me. If I got a piece that's real porous, what I will do is I'll use a thin as kind of a sealer coat and then sand it back out. It gives me a little bit broader base to start with. As far as applying it goes, just a piece of paper towel, a good shop towel. I don't use any of the commercial paper towels. I want something that's got a little bit more beef to it. It might get a little sticky, so I don't want the dust felt coming off from it, so to speak. And as far as applying it goes, I always make sure that I got enough towel up my hand to hold on to it tight, because again, it can get sticky. And if it does grab, you just let go and bear with it. Get your lid dusted off and you're already back at it. As far as applying it goes, and that's where I think the real learning curve is how to put enough on in multiple coats to have enough to sand and buff back out. Process, I'm going to apply it, lightly sand the marks from the rag. Some people will even use cloth. I had too many marks, ridges from applying it with the actual soft cotton cloth rag. So what I'll do is set up my towel. I'm going to put about a pea-sized drop of CA back about 1 inch from the tip of my finger. When I get the lathe up and running, probably just a little slower, medium speed. I'm going to apply the rag to the part and then slowly push it into the glue that's on my rag. Helps me adjust how much is going on. Another drop and keep going. And what I do generally is start from one corner and hit it and then slowly work in and across the piece. The key is just laying as many thin, consistent coats you can. If you start having ripples and stuff like that, stop right away, as they're only going to magnify, and sand them back out and start over. So, yes?
I see you have bushings on there. You don't use like the plastic bushings?
I do not. I found it's just as easy, you know, changing stuff around. You don't lose center if you don't take it off your lathe. I generally use a mantle saver, so I'll finish everything before it actually comes off my lathe. Being in this case, I will finish these at some point. I may not finish them today. I set them up with a nut. I like to keep everything as close to the headstock as I can. And as long as you don't go crazy with how much glue you're putting on there, I have not had issues with breaking them off the bushings. They will stick a little bit. When you're prepping your stuff, go through all your sandpaper. I do use a backed foam paper. One is like a 800 grit, the other is like a 1200 grit, just to give me a really nice sheen. If there's any imperfections, they're going to come through because you're going to be putting a glass-like finish on it and it just magnifies everything. So take the time, prep your part right. If you have dust or if you sand the CA and leave white spots in it, make sure you clean it up. I just use denatured alcohol to clean it back out. It does raise the grain a little bit. You do have to be cautious you don't flood it. You just want to get that dust back out of it. A little bit of air pressure and some denatured alcohol generally takes it back out. You can see a little bit in there yet. So, as far as the planet goes, I'm going to go ahead with the burl piece and put a little thin on it. The other one, I'm just going to go straight into it with medium. I do it under power. Some people say it doesn't work under power. I've seen some finishes out there that is just strictly wipe on. They say you're done. You look at them and all you see is vertical striping. After I get it on, it's usually a quick shot of...
Trying to shine the ball.
Behind the big bowl, behind you.
Ah, okay, there we go. You know what I'm looking for. That's all it takes.
What speed is your lathe going? 400?
Yeah, 6, 8, somewhere in there. Now in this case, I'm just going to lightly sand that back out. You do need to be careful of your overall shape. This is kind of a high point. I'm going to burn through that really quick, and it's going to show in the final finish. Okay, I got it in there and smooth. I do recommend sanding with the grain in between coats, or at least every other coat, just to keep things consistent. And I think it helps break up the cross-grain scratches. Just a little denatured alcohol. Be very careful with moisture. If you have a blank that's not quite dry, you put a CA finish on it and trap that moisture. Usually 3-4 days, you're going to see a big cloud. It does not play well with water. A couple other things I've played around with. I didn't believe it would work after having problems with Coca-Cola and some of the stuff that has oils in it. Some people suggest that you take boiled linseed oil, put it on your blank. Helps the grain pop, and you put CA right over top. For some reason, there's just no reaction. Move down on my rag just a little bit. In there. That one of the radius is a little bit tougher. Roll on it smooth. And by going into it, it just helps me gauge how much is really putting on. And if you do that right, you get virtually no splatter. There are about 3 coats on there. See the little ripples. Now, one thing I did neglect to bring with me is at this point, a lot of times what I will do is take a piece of like 400 silicone carbide paper, something that's really slippery. And I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera or not, but you can see how many ripples I got in there. Okay. I don't know if this paper's been strong enough, but I want to take those back out. This is a piece of that foam back. It's rated 600 to 800 grit. And I've taken that down to where there's really very little left.
Ring size.
So then, depending on how much your finishing material is actually getting soaked into your piece, will determine how many coats I put on.
Is building coats when you put each flat layer on that, is that actually building coats on it?
Yes.
Now, you talked about the cloudy, the cloudiness of the finish from moisture. I've had 2 questions from fellow members in the Kalamazoo Club regarding where does the crackling come from that shows up 3 or 4 days afterwards. And I don't have an answer for them because I normally don't use PVC finish.
I shouldn't say this, but I've never had that happen. Now I'm jinxed.
My first pen, actually, it didn't even happen 3 or 4 days later. I did, my very first pen I did use the CA glue finish. And it looked great for about 5 months. And all of a sudden I got this spider web of cracks that just ran up the whole thing. So,
Boy, I would have to guess that it has some type of, there was something in the wood itself. It could have been oils or...
it was an Australian burl, so I don't know if that had anything to do.
Burls are tough. I don't think there's any way of getting around burls to guarantee a uniform outcome. I've had so many nice pieces of burl that I've been working with, and I get to the last few sanding coats, and all of a sudden they end up burning through or clouding the finish or something, and it's just like, give up on it, start over. Strip it down, do it again, same thing happens. Do it again, same thing. Enough, friction polish.
Doctor's pen finish.
Yep. Okay, so after I get that sanded down, I got most of my ripples out of it. I'm going to run through it with a micro mesh, starting with, I think it was like 1200 down to 32, 36,000 grit. I wet mine down, seems to last a little bit longer. Friction polish works really great with, like a waste wood. You do have to polish your laminate or your plastics before you get into the top coats. If you do that, do not use water on it. Water will trap into the wood part. It doesn't sit on the acrylic, of course, but okay, I'm gonna hit that. And again, about every other 2 for my first few. I'm going to sand with the grain. When I start going to my finer, I do pick up the speed a little bit, hopefully get a little bit of buffing action going there. Just a little light.
What liquid were you using there?
Just water. Just a little lubricant helps keep your micro mesh from getting too filled up. Now basically, since we put a coat of plastic over it, I finish it up with plastic polish.
Do you have a brand name on that plastic polish?
This is Hut. To be honest with you, I bought that bottle probably 5 years ago and I haven't used it up yet, so I haven't tried anything else. Okay. Looks like I could have put a little bit more C in it. I probably would have got a little bit better luster. But you get the general idea of what we're going to go through. Then one other thing too, you can take it one step further if you want, and that is actually buff it out. I use just an acrylic pen buffing system. It's basically a wheel with compound and then a dry wheel to finish it up. As far as like what Jim was asking about with the bushings, okay, they're actually going to be stuck on there. What I do is run them to the end, where you can see here, and just slowly move it back and forth. Break it free and pull it out. You do have to be cautious about cleaning that little flange. If you look real closely, there's going to be a little bit of a residue of the CA left on the end of the pen. That needs to be cleaned out of there before you try to press it together. If you don't, it's very likely that it's going to chip off and back up.
Question,
Yes?
or actually a comment. I use CA a lot on pens, and I noticed when I put it on, there's some fumes that come off of it.
Yeah?
Aren't very good. And I hook my dust, my vacuum up with a little collector in the back of a lathe, and that seems to take.
Just pull that, yeah. I find different woods have different odor characteristics, even just gluing tubes inside. It seems like all of a sudden I'll hit a piece that, losing where the start button is, it's not where mine is. Just charge that wheel a little bit. I'm going to actually buff this vertically with the grain. The theory is there that if you have any really light cross-grain scratches from the same process, you're going to take them out. I got a couple small ones in there that I did not get out, but you get the general idea. So I'll go ahead and send these around too. That's basically it. As far as cleaning the flange go, I keep a piece of 400 grit paper actually glued right to my workbench, really flat surface, and just very carefully we'll roll the pen at a small angle and then drag it across in like a circular motion. By rolling it first, it breaks that down a little bit, the rest of it cleans it up, and I've had very little problems with any of that coming back apart. Yeah?
You ever had any trouble with the accelerator causing the CA to bubble on you?
Yes. I've used an accelerator that's had a lot more pressure, and it tends to disperse the CA. So if you notice when I did it, it's always back a lot further than what I would normally use. It's just a light fog, and it doesn't take much to set it.
Yeah, I used the spray bottle from here.
I have not had luck with that. I don't think it comes out as fine as what you want it to.
Probably. Yep.
So, yeah, I use a lot of that, but for this type of stuff, I'll use an aerosol.
What's the compound you're using to charge your wheel with?
It's acrylic buffing compound. It came as a kit.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a Blue Rouge. I don't know if that makes a difference or not.
I'm using Triple E on one wheel and Carnauba wax on the other.
Triple E seems to be a little coarse, but you know, if you're taking it back out with wax, this is just a dry wheel to clean it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what they recommended for acrylic. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Like some of you have found, buffing is of interest to everybody. This whole buffing system was invented by a chap named Jerry Beal, and others have gotten on the bandwagon. I bought all this stuff from him directly. There are 3 different wheels. Let me talk about the arrangement first. Some lathe manufacturers or some buffing suppliers, or even Jerry, have created a device to go on a lathe. And I found that that doesn't work for me at all. Mainly because you have much less control and you don't have the kind of flexibility and visibility you want if you want to buff a variety of shapes. For a demonstration, I'm going to take this is just a plain piece of quarter sawn white oak. I did a little touch-up sanding with a sanding block. I don't even know what it was, but it was probably about 180 or so on this face. I'll show you what the difference is between what's planed and with a little light sanding and then what is actually buffed with no finish on it. There's been some discussion about finishes. So there are 3 different compounds that Jerry recommends. Triple E, this is the original block. I've used this for 15 years and I still have half of it left. This is called White Diamond. This is a coarser iron oxide based abrasive. This is finer. It's well, they call it white diamond. It's essentially alumina. The abrasive particles are bigger in here, smaller in here. There are some cautions associated with buffing that I've learned over the years, and that is, if you use this, be careful with the particular wood that you're buffing, because if it's open grain and it's dark, and there are some like that, walnut's a great example of it, this is going to lodge in the wood, and you may not like that. So the preliminaries to buffing the piece, I'll simply tell you what I do on almost everything that I buff, and that is I give it a couple of coats of partially diluted, fast-drying min-wax polyurethane. And there are lots of the urethanes that have been mentioned here, and that's the only one I use. And I use the gloss variety. And the reason I use gloss is it doesn't contain any minerals that are used to reduce the sheen, or the shine, the gloss. Semi-gloss and others, they actually have opaque minerals in them that are extremely fine, and they dull the surface. So what you put on, the more coats you have, the less clarity you have in being able to see what's in the wood. I try to emphasize what's in the wood as opposed to trying to muddy that up with whatever's on the surface. Not everything wants to be glossy, so when I use fast-drying polyurethane, I slop it on for the first coat, and of course it just sinks in so that the piece almost looks like this, doesn't have any gloss to speak of. After that, I start wiping on, and within about 30 or 40 seconds, I'll wipe it off. Just to get rid of any liquid that I can see on the surface, any shiny spots. And I'll do that a couple of more times. Typically, you can do this twice a day. I do it before I go to work in the morning, I do it in the evening, and do it 2 or 3 times, and now the piece is good to go. So now I have a choice. I can put on a coat of fast-drying polyurethane, just wipe it on, get it as light as possible so that it shows nice and wet, and then leave it alone. And I've got a nice glossy surface. Some pieces like this, love it. Okay, it looks perfect on a piece of wood like that. Other woods like this, now I'm giving you some opinions here, so if I'm not trying to offend anybody or tell you that what you're doing is wrong or I'm right. It's a matter of personal preference. But if I had a piece of wood like this, it would not ever be glossy. It doesn't want to be. And yet, you want to be able to see that it has some protection on it because it's going to be used for something. It would in my house anyway. So you put on a coat and let it be just a light sheen. Or you may choose to buff it and put a wax on it. That's a matter of personal preference. Okay. 3 different compounds. This is the third. This is wax. This is Jerry's version of the carnauba wax that people use. I tend to use this less and less. If you buy a very high grade of carnauba wax from one of the wood supply places like Woodcraft, it doesn't come in a hard bar like this. It is. It has a little solvent added to it, so it's a paste. A little thicker than toothpaste, and you can wipe it on, and then of course you have to go through the routine of letting the solvent flash off, letting the wax start to cross-link, and then you have to buff it. And the thing about carnauba wax, which makes it amenable to this method, not so much when you wipe it on like I just described, it is hard to buff. It takes elbow grease to do it, but it is beautiful when it's done. Okay. Now, I'll use these on surfaces that are flat, planar, or convex. So if Doug agreed to let me do this, I would use wheels on this surface and on this surface. You can't use a wheel in here unless you've got a radius that's kind of like this. Okay, you could use a wheel in this. You have to be careful. And that's the big reason why I chose this system, is when I'm buffing, I don't rely on my hands and my wrists to go in here. I rely on simply being able to dance with this piece in sort of this fashion on a wheel. And I'll admit to having lost a few, but not very many. The ones that I have been heartaches. As everybody knows, they'll get grabbed and thrown across the room. For the concave surfaces, let's just put these here for the time being. You need a shape like this. And I scoffed at these for a time. I didn't buy them originally. And then I was at a woodworking show, Milwaukee or Novi or somewhere, and I saw these being demonstrated, and they really do work well. So there are 3 different sizes. These are big ones. As you can see, this one gets used more because I don't make a lot of big stuff. And then there are itty bitty ones. And
Get your different sizes.
from the same place. I think they sell them as,
Where?
oh, well, I'm guessing that these are available at Woodworker Supply or from Craft Supplies in Utah or from Woodcraft Baby.
Woodcraft has, I think, the
One each.
Look up Jerry Beal's website, B-E-A-L-L. I'm guessing he has these. I don't know, I don't remember where I got them. I've had them for so long. They've got little marks on them that tell you which material to use. And the reason for that is because he has researched, he's a very anal engineer. I try not to be quite that bad, personally. But the cloth is not the same from abrasive to abrasive. And so I wouldn't, you could think about doing this yourself, but he's done an awful lot of work to sell something that is as functional as possible. And so the cloth is matched to the abrasive. So the cloth in this one and the cloth for this one is not the same. The same thing with the wax. All right, let's do something here. Start with triple E. The adapter, I don't know how many sizes there are. There may only be one, and so you have to match your motor shaft size to the adapter.
That's that motor curve,
1750, I think, 1725. It's a standard electric motor, 3rd horsepower. It's a salvage job. Everybody knows there are electrical contractors out there, and so you just go find one or a place that repairs electric motors. And it's surprising the bargains that you can get. I rebuilt my old Delta lathe a few years ago, turned it into a state-of-the-art, took it from a 4-speed to a state-of-the-art, electronically controlled, reversible, all of that, continuous, and did that for about $250. The most expensive part of the whole deal was the variable frequency drive that I had to buy to go with it. I got a motor for $10 a horsepower. Now, you can buff a cross grain, you can buff with the grain. I'm going to go with it for the time being. And I'll take a look at it and see what I can see. One of the things you find is that the longer you're on the wheel, the warmer things get. For example, this is warm to the touch, it isn't hot yet. But if you, I'll rotate this, if you look at the surface, you'll see that this is kind of dull. And down here, this is really bright already. It's starting to really shine. I don't know how the picture looks.
Aim it my way. Right, like hold it right there. See the halfway part there?
This is matte, and this is small m, and this is shiny. Okay, now let's go a little more. One of the things you find is if the scratch pattern on the workpiece is relatively uniform, it doesn't take very long to do this. Okay?
It's really close to the wall. There you go. It's hard to tell on the screen up there, but I can see it here.
Okay, there's the dull one. Oh, this is the shiny end, this is the dull one. I'm off. Now you know why the weathermen need training. They got to do all this in the dark. So yeah, there. Okay, you can see the difference in reflectance right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, that's just been sanded a little bit after planing. And that's just been buffed for what, 30 seconds, maybe a minute? Now you can see that the chatoyancy differences in that wood are showing up already, and it actually looks like it has texture. It looks like this is going on. Well, no, you can't do that. I mean, it is still flat, but it looks different because it's the reflectivity is so different.
How do you clean
Screwdriver?
Every once in a while it needs it. I usually do it with sandpaper, a flat sheet on a board of scrap, very coarse sandpaper, and just bump up against it. For a lot of these, I haven't done any of that in probably in years. As you can see, I don't use nearly as much of this. Okay, now, as David Ellsworth would say, it's just a piece of wood. Okay, so let's see.
Have to get the right angle.
Yeah, I'm trying to orient so I can show a little reflectivity. I'm close. Geez, I'm not good at this.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
There you go.
close, okay? Now, if you can take oak and put a mirror finish on it, just imagine what you could do with bird's eye. Bird's eye maple is, if you do this with bird's eye, it is just spectacular. You don't have to put anything on it. You just do this. And if you have a relatively simple piece, it's easy to do. Okay, you can pass this around. Now that didn't take long. And there isn't anything on that one yet. I mean, now you have a choice. You could wipe it with alcohol to get the wax off of it. And you could put a finish on it if you wanted to, or just put wax on it, and it's sort of a done deal. Now, it has no protection, so even though it's got wax on it, fingerprints will show. If somebody drops a...
Now this doesn't have wax on it yet, does it?
It only has whatever is used as the binder in this. So there is some, because when you heat this up, it loads the wheel.
You haven't done your third step on it.
That's right. So that's just a piece of wood.
So you would buff and then finish?
So it's a personal choice. You get really interesting looking character. If you have more figure in the wood, putting some finish on first, like just one coat of fast drying polyurethane, my finish, but any really. And oftentimes the more color there is in the finish, like, what's that one that's got that very short bench life? Senior moment here.
Box elder?
No, water locks. Water locks. If you put water locks on something that's got a lot of figure in it, like walnut crotchwood or something else, now that figure just jumps out at you, okay? If you just put one coat on it and then buff it, it is really nice.
Is that an 8-inch, 8-inch wheels? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they are. They're the biggest they make, and they're big enough. Now, I will admit that there have been times when I've taken a piece like this and done the inside with a wheel. It's, you gotta be paying attention. You don't, it's been on the floor enough, I guess. I'm just gonna charge this up. Yeah, there's either something wrong with my cord or my motor's a little tired. But it's not using much power when you're doing this. Okay. Now this is one you want to make sure you don't mess it up. I mean, that's just a piece of wood, but this has got some character. It's a nice shape. The times when I've gotten myself into trouble is when I've gotten hoggish, if that's the right term, and I've been working around the rim, like this, all right? So I'll do this, a little of this first. And because of the fact that the rim is not flat, the rim is conical, you want to get all of that surface. Now, one of the things that is a benefit is if your turning technique is good enough, or you're taking the time like Doug has, well, it could be a lot of both, and the finish is so flawless now. I mean, there are no machining marks on here. There are no scratches on here, which is where you want to be when you're done turning. You don't want to have to do a lot of sanding, but if you do sanding, you want it to go very quickly. So this surface is just beautiful. All right. Now it's a matter of personal preference. Do you want to go circumferentially? Do you want to go radially? I don't have an answer to that. I tend to go this way because I feel it gives me better coverage, so to speak. I don't miss any places. But when you go for the diamond, if you've missed a spot doing this, you'll notice it. I don't know how to describe that. One way of knowing that you have enough is if your wheel is not deforming as it's going around. When you do this, you push on it, you'll see it bellies out. That's usually more than you need. But it's personal preference. It depends on whether you have figure in the wood. Sometimes you have some imperfections in the wood, and you want to be sure that you try to round that off a little bit, I guess. Again, using this as an example, here we've got some bark inclusions. Here we've got some bark that's gone. Now, this would be really hard to buff. And maybe even a little dangerous because, I shouldn't say dangerous, but you greatly increase the opportunity of having it torn out of your hands and thrown across the floor. So it's not an ideal surface condition to try to buff through a fence. What I'm doing right now is just looking at this to see which areas need a little improvement. What I want is a surface that is uniform. Doesn't have to be all, so that's the reason why good lighting is nice. You got a light over here, a light over here. I'm sorry? No, it's just been sanded. Turned and sanded. And well, it's starting to look pretty nice already. You can see it's glossy. Light's reflecting off of it. It's just a piece of wood. We were talking earlier about having outside demonstrators come in. It's
Which step are you doing here? Is this Carnuba or is this?
no. This is the first one. This is the roughing wheel. I'm just getting all of the surfaces with this wheel.
What grip did you sand that down to? Double steel ball. So I threw it down there, yeah. That's 600 grit maybe? I did put a sanding seal on it. Shellac. So after that I went back and I started at
So you did?
and sanded it again. So I guess it does have some finish.
Wow, see? You may find that that's all you need. Sanding sealer is nice to work with. Slop it on, soaks in, dries fast. All right. Next, since it's cherry, maple works well as well. We'll go white diamond. It's bonus. talking about demonstrators. I have a personal preference. As you find out once you know me a little bit, I have an opinion on everything. I'm not afraid to share it. But in terms of wood turning, I have learned that, because I've been in classes with lots of big guys, I prefer to have a class with someone who teaches me a technique, improves my technique, makes me a better turner, as opposed to showing me what he thinks. The problem with people that make stuff is that we tend to then buy what they use to make it, but we've not learned how to use it. And I don't know what anyone's experience is with demonstrators, instructors, or whatever, and what your personal preferences are. If I were going to pay money to take a class, and I have, I'd spend more time with Stuart Gallery. From a technical standpoint, he's the best wood turner in the world. He can make anything. He's also an opinionated person. I don't mind that at all. And his goal is to make you a better turner. Not make something, or not show you how he makes the high-end stuff that he sells. He emphasizes technique. So I do too. This looks pretty good. When you're doing a rim portion like I am, if the ID edge, I should say is at the ID, if it's an edge as opposed to a radius, it becomes more problematic because there's more grab. All right. Now, you can compare the inside and the outside started out being exactly the same. Now you can look at what this is like on the outside versus the inside. Now if you could send that around quickly, because I want to do the inside as well, I'll show you what that's like. But it isn't all that different from what you've already seen. I'll charge both of these up and then we'll see. Which is better size. Okay, so far it's just a piece of wood. I mean, it was turned to a very nice shape. It was prepared well, but you haven't agonized yet about polyurethane, varathane, glue, or lacquer, shellac, armor seal, water locks, Minwax. None of that decision has come up yet. And once you see what these look like, you may not want to worry about it. I've got a 60-second story. There's a display in the Renwick Gallery of the first decorative wood turnings that were really made. This was either in the 30s or the 40s. There was a professor at Northwestern, an art professor, and I'm having a senior moment, I can't remember his name, but it'll come to me. And he, as part of an art degree, or for an art degree, he was actually teaching students to turn. And this was before wood turning was anything but a, you know, an East Tennessee craft, so to speak. And these students were charged with a final exam project, finest turned object they could make. And he would then judge them and grade them. So being students, having seen what wood looks like, they would go out, and they'd buy a piece of wood like this, and they would turn their form, and eventually you'll find out that form matters, and they would bring it in. And the first thing he would do to grade their artistic sense is he would take their object, spray paint it black, right in front of them. And he'd set it down, let the paint wet dry, and then, you know, he'd hold it up. Now, it's just the black shape. And therein is one of the keys that we can all benefit from is, all right, how good does it look? How is the shape? How is the form? Does it please the eye? Is it well proportioned? Is it tall enough, wide enough? All of that, and as you can see here, this is a beautiful form. So the students learned quickly. You know, one of the things that's nice about demonstrating buffing is the fact that you can philosophize while you do this. And you have a captive audience. All right, let's see the little one, how that looks. Now, this is the time when you see the advantage of having it end-mounted on the motor shaft, as opposed to being mounted between centers on your lathe. You can't do this on the lathe.
Now, the Beal system, they make one, all this, it also mounts on your lathe.
I know, but I don't use it. I don't.
Prefer not to use it.
I realize this isn't all that glorious to look at. I have to provide some entertainment, but as I mentioned earlier, if you ever have a chance to take a class with Stuart Gary, I encourage you to do so. Now, one of the things that he endorses, of course, which Doug doesn't, but it's okay, there's nothing wrong with a difference of opinion. Stuart really encourages people to learn how to sharpen manually. And I do too. And there's one reason for that, and that is, I have a Wolverine system, I used it for years. And occasionally I use it. The problem with any jig and fixture system for sharpening is that you have to stop, you have to go over here, you have to put it in the jig, you have to measure it, make sure it's the right projection and all that. You got to go over to the lathe or to the grinder, and if you're sharpening the same tool time after time, that's okay, but then you got to set up the grinder, and you have to sharpen, and then you got to go back. If you sharpen it yourself, turn around, put it on the wheel, come back, and the lathe hasn't even coasted to a stop yet, so you don't even turn it off. All of us are inhibited to resharpen when we should, because we don't want to take the time. Turning is fun, and so why do I want to take 2, 3, 4 minutes to sharpen when I could take 2 or 3 or 4 more minutes and turn? The problem is that if you got a dull tool, you learn bad habits. And that's the death of turning. It's the proprioceptive learning that you need for turning is, it works whether you're learning good techniques or bad. And unlearning bad techniques, trust me, I'm a poster child for this. It takes time and concentration. Okay. Now, how's that compare to the lacquer finish?
You can tell it's not as thick, you know, with the lacquer, it's, you can see there's a finish on it. Yeah.
So this is not bad.
Now, what would you put on this now?
Wax. Hang on. Let's.
No, I'm not asking you to put it on.
I'm going to put wax on it as they recommend, and we will see how that works. What I'm going to do is I'll put wax on the outside and just leave it as is on the inside, so you can make a judgment as to whether that was worth doing.
What kind of wood is that? Just cherry.
Pretty.
Does that dull over time? Does that dull
No.
over time?
No. Cherry will change color, obviously. Yeah, we all know that. But a wax finish doesn't really dull. But if it's a nice looking piece, you're either going to put things in it and put it on a coffee table, or, you know, with the wine and the cheese, or you're going to have people look at it and handle it. And wax, it will show fingerprints or the results of handling, and needs to be refreshed from time to time. But that's easily done. You can put another coat of any kind of wax on it, or you can use the same one you used at our Carnauba at the beginning. I've done that plenty of times. So this, one of the things about the bar that you get is the first time you drop it, you've got lots of pieces of it. So I'm typical Yankee frugal turner. Look, in a way I'm going to not use these pieces. Okay. Now the goal is for the wax to transfer from the wheel to the workpiece.
Would you normally go to the white compound first?
I did. Yeah, yes, on almost everything. As the only proviso is, okay, if it's a dark wood, you know, there's some open, well, not much open grain, you call the bowl. But there are some woods, walnut being the worst, of course, where if you've got good, dark walnut hardwood, it's got all kinds of pores in it, and it just doesn't look it muddies the color. It's not that it doesn't do a fine job on the surface of protecting and improving the gloss and all that, but you've got those white particles. I haven't found a way of eliminating them. Consequently, they don't do much wrong. Okay. Just wax. A little. Okay. Any more questions? I can talk all night.
Because of time constraints, you weren't able to get as deep a polish on that as you wanted, right?
Yes. I quit when I thought it looked okay, as opposed to truncating the time in order to save time.
The wood seems to be darkening to some extent. Is that from different coatings, or is that from the heat?
I think it's the heat. Temperature matters in all chemical reactions, and cherry's color is associated with light and oxidation, but in warmer, if it gets warmer, it's going to change faster.
Can you go through like a friction polish and then buff it?
You probably could, but I wouldn't. Rather than a friction polish, what I would do is simply put shellac on. A mention was made earlier about a mixture of shellac and alcohol and something else. Well, as all of you may know, if you don't know now, you will. Shellac is an alcohol solution, and consequently, putting in more alcohol is just getting a weaker shellac, nothing more. So if you buy a very dilute shellac can or whatever, something like sanding sealer, that just means it's got a lot of alcohol in it. There are different kinds of shellac, and so they can make a difference in the color that you see. From ultra blonde, which gives you a solution that's about this color, to something which is almost reddish brown or dark brown. It's all a function of which shellac you choose, and the darker it is, the greater the contrast that you see in the wood. There's one other thing to keep in mind. You were mentioning the problem with moisture associated with a CA finish. All alcohols have water in them. You can't refine alcohol to get the water out unless you go to a very elaborate chemical procedure. And consequently, and alcohol is hygroscopic. So if you use alcohol, it's going to absorb whatever moisture is in the air, and that moisture is in the solution. So when you use shellac, use anything with alcohol, there is some water that is going into the wood immediately. And then it's a function of what happens next. Okay?
Drop the piece.
Oh yes, thanks.
What was the question in the back there?
Did you get all those adapters from Vigo?
I believe so.
Okay, this one to put on the motor?
Yes.
Okay.
When you buy it, they'll ask you if you want it to be lathe mounted, you're going to put it on a Morse taper spindle, or you're going to put it on a motor, and there may even be options as to whether or not you have a motor shaft that's threaded or a motor shaft that's keyed. In this case, it's keyed, and what your motor shaft diameter is. One of the things that you want to make sure of when you get your motor, if you're going to do this, make sure there's enough shaft extension. The more shaft extension you have, the easier it is for you to use, the more versatile it gets. This is okay. If I had my druthers, I'd get it a little bit longer. Okay?
Thank you.
This is the bowl, and it's going to be shiny when I get done here. And that's not really my preference. I started doing things glossy because my wife likes it, and if I had something at the shows too, if I do something shiny and something in a Danish oil, and they're both the same sitting there, I'll never sell that Danish oil. I'll sell the shiny one right away. People like shiny things, you know. Let's see, get Chuck up here. I used an HLPP system here that I bought from Rockler probably 3 years ago for I think $140 or something like that. It's not a really expensive system. One thing that let me get all this out. Little trick that I do here, when you get throwing away your old socks, cut the bottom off and keep the top part, and it works great for covering up your chuck when you're spraying stuff. So I use them for covering up my chuck, my vacuum chuck, my regular chucks. Mostly my vacuum chuck. My regular chucks are covered with lacquer already, so. Put that on there and cover that all up. I'm going to lacquer the back side of this just from the edge up, because I'm going to take and reverse mount this at home and use my vacuum chuck and concave that whole inside, and then I'll lacquer the back, the rest of it. But I'll lacquer the outside edge of this and then the whole front. So, get this stuff out of the way here. I use Delspar. This is the label off the can. It's pre-catalyzed lacquer, clear. It's got a UV protectant in it, which I do think helps. I have some box elder that I sprayed this 3 years ago that's still pretty red. You can pass this around if somebody wants to jot down what that is or snap a picture of it.
Did you send away for this lacquer, or did you get this locally?
I get that at Repco Light on 44th Street,
Okay.
like near maybe East Harrison, 44th Street, somewhere in that area.
One in Plainfield too.
Yeah, yeah, and I know there's more than one around town.
They're moving.
I have 90 sheen, so there's not much sediment in here. When you open up the can that's been sitting, you'll see the bottom of it, there'll be like a white sediment. That's the sheen. So if you get like 60 sheen, there's a lot of that in there. You need to steer that up. If you get 120 sheen, I don't think there's anything in it. I use 90, it's got very little in it. So I don't have to worry about it settling. But when I had 60 sheen, I was using that. I would have to shake this up on a daily basis when I use it, make sure I look at the bottom, make sure I mixed all the sediment back up, because that's what gives it the dull. Otherwise, it's shiny. And that was how I started. I used to use 60. I forgot to shake it once. I sprayed something, and it came out really glossy. And I'm like, wow, was that glossy? I didn't expect that. Of course, my wife loved it. You need to do that to all of them. So I buy 90 now, and basically I do it to all of them. So everything I do is really glossy. HLBPs, you can adjust how this flows. Oh man, I must have ate my Wheaties yesterday. I can't turn that thing. What the heck?
I said I'm gonna try the lacquers. But when you don't clean it on a regular basis.
I don't ever clean this.
I know.
I never clean this. As a matter of fact, I put lacquer in it yesterday because I was lacquering something and it was really low. So I clean out the container, you know, but I don't ever clean the gun, very seldom. If you get this going diagonally, it comes out round. If you turn it this way, I believe that it's a straight up and down flame shot, and if you go the other way, it's horizontal. I like to do it round. When I spray this, every time you do a pattern, I don't know if you guys can see me, but you make your first spray, your second spray comes in, covers half of it. And then your next spray comes, your pattern covers half of that. So you're constantly doubling up as you go across stuff. So when I spray like the front, I'll go across and I'll go halfway down that pattern, I'll go back and forth. And that's that, you get double coverage on everything. So let's see, where's my, this thing has broken on me several times. The hose is cracked, I taped it back together, the switch burned out. So now I have a little remote that I use for it. So sounds like a vacuum cleaner. There, I just cleaned it back out again. That's all it takes to clean it. If I let this set like yesterday or 2 days ago, I pulled it out. I hadn't used it in 3 weeks. I pulled the button, the trigger, nothing happened. But after a couple times I pulled it, it started coming through and cleaned it all out. Worked just fine. I went and lacquered something. I've never had it where it sat so long that it was all dry and it couldn't get the bleed out. So I think because it's a self-bleeding, it's always blowing air through there, it helps clean it out. That's what I told the guy. I took a class at Woodcraft, and that was what he had said. If you get the ones that aren't bleeding, you might not have such success. You might have to do more cleaning. I don't know for sure on that. So I'm going to spray the backside first, and I'm going to kind of do it in areas and work my way up. I'm not going to spray on here and go zzz. I'm going to spray it, and I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to move over, and I'm going to spray it again and move up. If you take it and just go zzz right across, you'll see a spiral on the back of that. Even though you think you're going slow, and it's not going to matter. Let's see if we got the speed here right. All right, my assistant did a good job. I like to get this where I can see a reflection on the back here. We do have no way of seeing that anymore, but I can look at this as I'm going and see how thick I'm putting it on. I'm not going to spray this while it's turning on the front. It works well on the outside edges, but once you get to the middle, you'll leave a glob for sure. You'll have a run. If I'm doing a great big bowl, I might spray the outside edges while it's turning, but once I get down to the middle flat part, I'm going to shut it off, and I'm going to hand spray that middle part on the lathe. So.
Remove the light switch.
Let's turn it around, so I'll keep working on the top half here. I'm going to go both ways, with the grain and against the grain. I'm done with that.
Did you say that was thin?
This is, yeah, it doesn't come in different thicknesses, it's just lacquer, it's one, I thinned it though. And I didn't say that, but I use,
How thin should it be?
I do 75 of lacquer, 25 of thinner. So I fill this up to 600 with my lacquer, and then I put the last 200 of lacquer thinner and thinned it out. You can go thinner than that, but I think this is pretty thin.
Is that the way they recommend doing it, or to use a velocity cup?
They came with a velocity cup that I've never used. I just mixed it and started doing it that way. When I took the class at Woodcraft, that was what he had recommended, and so that was what I did. This is already dry. That's pretty flammable, isn't it? I don't know.
Do you do it in the basement, or do you do it out?
I have it in my garage. I have a garage. And I have a jet air purifier with a charcoal thing in it, and that works pretty good to remove the fumes from the air. But it gets pretty heady in the garage when I'm doing a lot of stuff. Because typically, I just did one coat here. Typically, I would do several coats. I would have at least 3 before I got done. But I'm just going to do one for now here and see how this...
Will you put that back on, Doug, the next coat as soon as it dries?
Yeah, I would do this back right now. Except I see a little up here, I got a piece of dust in there. Because typically I'll run my dust collector, I'll blow everything and get all the dust free in the air and turn on my dust collector and let it run on high for 10 minutes. And then I'll come out here and I'll lacquer and there's usually not any dust in the air after that. So.
Doug, do you need any sanding between coats?
What I'll typically do is, like when I'm sanding this, I'll do like my 2 or 3 coats on the back, and then I'll let it, and I won't put anything between coats. I see I did get a little run in here, it looks like. Unless I get a run. And then I'll take that run and I'll sand that off with some steel wool or some, or maybe 320 grit sandpaper, depending on how I feel about it. Yep, so I got that on there a little thick. I tend to do that when I fill my container back up, and it's new, and it's got lacquer thinner in there. It's thinner than what I've been doing. Oh, no, this one's cutting out on me. So I'll have to readjust my sprayer. I filled it up yesterday, and I didn't stop to readjust the flow, so it came out here a little heavy. So I don't think this is not, well, part of it's dry, but there's a run in the middle.
Can you see yourself in it? Because we're
Yeah.
seeing the light.
Can you see the light reflecting on that? I mean, it is shiny. What I'll do then, I'll give it 3 coats, typically, and if it looks rough in between, I'll give a sandpaper job, but usually just 3 coats, and try
3 coats.
just once it dries. Like right now, I'd already be giving this back another coat, and then by the time I get that done, the front's dry, I can give the front a coat. And so I've got 3 coats on in 10 minutes. I'll let it set overnight. And then the next day, I'll take some 320 or steel wool, whatever I feel like, depending on what kind of wood I'm using. And sort of stuff it all up and then give it one more coat. And then typically it comes out pretty darn shiny and smooth. But I do want to get a peel buffing system, so I want to use it on like some of my hollow forms and stuff. We can send that around if you guys want to look at that. It's got a run in the middle of it, but the back is dry. So that's it. Any questions? Okay, that's our